In this video, I'm going to show you how to write a formal lab report. At this point, you should have already completed the ice cube melting and salt and fresh water lab. You need to have your packet with all your materials, with all your data and everything to just type into the lab template that I have for you. So, in order to do this, you need to go to either my web page, where you can just click on the ice cube lab template, or you can go to Edmodo. If you have Edmodo, we have down here, you have the template here. You click on it, and it should open up in Word. Now, a smart thing to do would be to save this as just a blank document. Anytime in the future you want to do a lab report, even up through college, it's in a format that you can add to it or take off for it what you want, but it's a good base to start at so that you can always get what you really need for the lab. So I'm just going to open it. There it goes. Okay, so I'm going to open it here. And in this template, it's very easy. All you need to do is click into most of the gray areas and then just type in whatever you want. If you're going to save this to use this for other classes and things as you move through school, you hit File, you can hit Save As, and you can hit it and save it anywhere you want on your computer as a blank document, and then you can just use it whenever you need it. For this, I would save this under something that you will remember it as. Mr. O. Ice Cube Lab. And I like to save things when I'm first working on them on my desktop. That way I can, it's easily accessible, and then when I'm done with it, I'll file it away and I'll put it in whatever folder it needs to be, and I'll save it there. So, for this lab, I put it in there. All you need to do is click into these, okay? The title of this lab is The Melting of Ice in Salt and Fresh Water. Okay? The next thing you want to do is put in your student name, your name. And then your period. This is one that sometimes works a little wacky. For this one, I have to backspace the whole, there we go. Whatever period you're in, 1, 2, 5, 9, that's okay. The cool thing about this template, whenever you update it, it will change the date automatically for you. So every time you resubmit it, it'll put the date in, like the last time you work on it, every time you save it, it'll save it in the date the last time you did it. And you can put it in that way. It's pretty cool. As we go down, you'll retype in the title of the lab here. You know, melting of salt water, fresh water. This is just a directive to delete anything that's gray. You don't want to leave in when you print out the lab. Okay, when you print out the lab where you can send it electronically. So you just want to kind of backspace out of those things. For the question or problem, you should have that within here. This paper that we filled out, we have down here, you have the question. For this lab, does ice melt faster in salt or fresh water? It's right in here. So almost every one of these things down to the data table should be in here. You should already have that information already written in your handout packet for the lab. So, in here you can just type in whatever they are. Does ice melt faster in salt or fresh water? Okay? Easy enough, simple enough. The hypothesis is another one we have in there. It's in the next step 2 in our experimental design packet. Our hypothesis was if ice is placed in salt or fresh water, then the ice will melt faster in. Now this is where your own personal hypothesis goes there. If you think the salt water would have melted faster, you would put salt water. If you thought the fresh water, you would put fresh water. If you didn't think either, if you thought it would be the same, you would put in neither water, something like that. So you can put in what you want. You fill in your blank. So that's your hypothesis. Materials, there was a list of materials that we had on there. There was a balance, a timer, 3 beakers, 3 ice cubes, water, things like that, things that we use, the materials in the lab. The procedures, we also did our own procedures, but if you didn't write those down in your lab packet, in the one page, there are procedures down the one end. So you can just retype them in if you wish to do that. They're a little bit longer than the procedures that we did for the class. But for the first one, it says mass of salt, okay, how many grams. You would have to put 2 values in for that because we use 2 values of salt in this lab. The next thing, you want to make sure you put in your variables, okay? The independent variable, it's in your packet, what the independent variable is, which was the amount of salt. The dependent variable, which is the melt time. Any constants that were in there was the amount of water. Things, we listed them all, you should have them in there. Amount of water, size of the ice cube, shape of the ice cubes, those things. Now your data table. This, you're going to fill in the information for the whole class. Everything that the whole class did. So you would put in your group. Say you were group A, you would put group A in there, okay? And then you would just put in the data for the whole class. So you would just put the times in there. The amounts of salt, 0.1, 6, 0.2, and so on. You would put in all the salt amounts, all the times for each group that they had. These times are ideal times. They're not actual times from any lab group. These are just times the way it should. If it was done in ideal conditions, this is what the time should have been. Dependent variable, the ice melt time. 6 minutes and 5 seconds for that. If it goes down to the bottom, that's fine. 11:45 for the large amount of salt. So you just put this in, you would fill in the whole table just like that. The graph, you're doing the graph yourself. We started doing the graph on graphing paper in class. We talked about how to set it up. Everybody seems to be on the right track of that. When you print out your lab, you staple it to your lab. If you're submitting it electronically, you'll have to hand in the graph by hand in class, and I'll match it up with the lab when I grade it electronically. The next section are the calculations. You put in your time, the melt time for your salt water, your 2 salt water values. Put in, like, for 0.1 grams, it was 6 minutes and 5 seconds. For 1.6 grams, it was 11 minutes, 45 seconds, something like that. Melt time for the fresh water, you would put that in there. For me, it was 5 minutes, 43 seconds, that stuff. The next are the analysis questions. Which melted quicker, the ice in the salt water or fresh water? Answer it in a full sentence. Just don't put a word saying fresh water. Say, you would type something in like the ice melted faster in the fresh water. Okay? That would be the simplest thing you could put. A better one would be the ice melted in 5 minutes and 43 seconds for fresh water, and in 11 minutes and 45 seconds for 1.6 grams of salt water. Okay, this really tells it a lot better. It's more thorough and it's more that. So observations from the lab. This is where you want to talk about anything unusual that you saw about the lab. There was something unusual that was going on between the salt water and the fresh water. There was something that visually looked different. You want to put in things like that. Anything else that you noticed while you were doing the lab, you want to put it in there. Why do you suppose you got the results? We went over kind of what happened there. This is where you can speculate kind of like what you think happened, what was going on. If you're watching this video, I'll give you a hint. It had to do with density. Okay, and then the last question here, question 4, you'll just have to click in there and type something in there. What did you notice from looking at your graph? Here you describe your graph. What was the graph doing? How was it trending? And all that stuff. The last one is the conclusion. Now in here, this you can't click in and do it. You're going to have to highlight the whole thing and type it up that way. This is the one that doesn't do it for some reason. Basically, all these things need to be in there. You want to restate the problem again, state what the hypothesis was, explain the results, explain whether they supported or disproved it, and then list any questions. There's an example question at the end here. At the end of your lab here, there's an example of what a good one would look like. Don't put this in. This has nothing to do with the saltwater lab. But this you can kind of see how they restate the problem, the hypothesis, and explain their results in there. So this is how you really want to work with this. Okay, write out the salt lab the same kind of way. Don't use personal pronouns like I or we. It should be the problem for this lab was to see whether ice melted faster in salt water or fresh water, or the hypothesis was, and go on from there. The results showed that something along those lines. I hope this was helpful for you, and if you have any questions, ask me in class, or you can email me. Thank you.